All right, hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to be going over lighting in Unreal Engine, specifically lighting from an HDRI and how I set up my sky and exposure and everything to light an environment. So the environment that we're going to be taking a look at is this one right here. So we're going to run through, I'm going to delete all the lights. We're going to start from scratch. We're going to build the sky from scratch. We're going to download an HDRI. We are going to start building with just a skylight, and then we're going to add in a directional light, and then finally finish off with some post-process effects. So here is what we start with, and then here is the example at the end that we finish with, and we can see that it's quite similar, almost identical. Also, I'm going to leave a link to download this scene in the description below. So if you'd like to download it, take a look, break it apart, relight it, light it yourself, do whatever you want to do. That's going to be available in the description below. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so here we are with the final lighting of the scene, and we're just going to create or duplicate this project and start the lighting from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do is delete all my lights. I'm going to delete the light mass importance volume, the post-process volume, the skylight, and the directional light. So with those deleted, I will go to my world settings and I'll hit reset on this. And I'm also going to type in force. So we're going to force no pre-computed lighting. So let's go ahead and hit build. That will destroy all lighting. I'm going to hit Alt F to get rid of the fog, and let's hit G and Alt F again. And we can see, especially if we go to lighting only, that there is no lighting. We're also seeing the sky dome out here. So let's delete that as well. So now here we are, and we can go to wireframe mode, and we've got no lighting whatsoever. Here we're seeing a bit of the reflections. So let's uncheck this and clear this out. So the first thing I want to do is create my sky dome. So I'm going to my engine content folder, and to make sure that that is showing up, I'm going to hit view options here in the content browser and check on show engine content. Okay, so with the engine content folder selected, I'm going to search for inverse. And here we've got this sphere inverse normals. So it is a sphere with the normals pointing inward. I'll go ahead and leave it right here for the moment while we create our sky material. So let's go ahead and clear out the search. I've got this sky master and this sky instance, and I've got a few different HDRIs, and I'll just go ahead and create a new folder. We'll call it sky, and we'll go in here. All right, so we'll right click, create a new material. I'm going to call this mm_sky master, and the is for master material. Let's right click on this and create a material instance. So I'm going to call this one mi sky instance, and we can go ahead and drag and drop this on our sphere, and then let's go ahead and open up the master. So the first thing I need to do is grab an HDRI. So in the folder up above, I have all these HDRIs that I downloaded from HDRIhaven.com. If you'd like to just take note of the name of them, and you can go and download those from HDRIhaven.com. But I'll grab this guy in here real quick. So one thing to note is that this is not a cube map. Okay, so let's actually go to HDRI Haven, and let's go to HDRIs, and I'm going to actually just copy the name of this, and let's go ahead and paste that in the search. Get rid of the 4K, and here's the HDRI that I'm using. So if we look on this, it's a .hdr. You'll find that some images on this site are either HDRs or EXRs. If it's an EXR, you can use this technique. You don't have to modify the file at all. But if it's an HDR, we're going to have to open this up in Photoshop and save it out as an EXR. So I'm just going to open this image up, and I'm just going to save this out. And instead of saving it as a radiance file, I'm going to save it as an open EXR. Okay, so once we hit save, we can close out Photoshop and jump back over to Unreal Engine. And when it comes in, if we hover over it, up to the right of the name, it's going to say texture instead of texture cube. If it comes in as an HDR, Unreal is going to recognize that as a cube map, and this technique won't work exactly. So now that I've got my HDR in here, I'm going to right click, convert it to a parameter, and we're going to call this HDRI selector. This will allow us to drag and drop different HDRs into the material instance. I'm going to grab the RGB out, and I'm going to multiply this. I'm going to hold the 1 key on my keyboard and left click to get a constant 1. I'm going to right click on this constant one and convert it to a parameter, and I'm going to call this sky brightness. I'm going to set its default value to 1 so that when multiplied we get the original result, because anything multiplied by 1 is the original value. I'm going to take the output of the multiply, I'm going to plug this into emissive color. Last thing I'm going to do is click in the empty space, and I'm going to set the shading model from lit to unlit. That's pretty much it. We can close out our master material, and now we can see that our sphere here is glowing. The normals are facing inward. Once we get inside the sphere, we can look all around. So because this is a material instance, we can now adjust some of those parameters that we set in the master. So I've got sky brightness and HDRI selector. So with this, I can, if I want to underexpose this image, I can start to drag this value down. And if I want to overexpose this image, I can drag it up. So let's leave it at 1, the current state, and we'll go ahead and close this. So the next thing I need to do is I need to scale this thing up. So I'm going to go over here and make sure that in the scale settings, I've got the lock pad here locked so that I'm affecting all values at once. And I'm just going to scale it up about 3,000 units. All right, so there is the sky out there in the background. If we noticed, there was a slight shift in the way the lighting is calculated. So if I look over here in the dark area, kind of see it get brighter. And then as soon as I move into view where the sky is, we can see that it gets darker. So this is the effect of auto exposure. Here we can kind of see that exposure raising. We don't have much here. We're just looking at the reflections, but we can kind of see that affecting us. So what we need to do is we need to add a post-process volume. So I'm going to just type in post. We'll grab a post-process volume in here. And in the post-process volume settings, I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to check on infinite extent unbound. This means that I don't have to be within the bounds of this physical volume. Rather, this will extend infinitely. All right, so the next thing I need to do is scroll back up to the top here, and where I've got this exposure drop down, I'm going to set my min and max brightness to a value of 1 and 1. This will lock my exposure. So now no longer, if I look outside, the exposure is set for the side, for the outside. And if I look in here, we're not going to change exposure. It's not going to try to compensate and raise up the exposure for this interior. If I need to, I can adjust the exposure compensation here, but for the time being, I'm just going to leave that at 1, and I'm probably not going to adjust this actually at all after. The next thing I want to do is add a light mass importance volume. So with the light mass importance volume, I'm going to drag this volume in. I'm going to hit G on the keyboard so we can see this. And I'm going to go into my orthographic views here, frame up, and I am just going to scale so that this is encompassing my what would be a playable area. This is basically going to tell light mass, hey, look, this is where all the important stuff is. Do your kind of full calculations within this volume, and then anything outside of this volume, we'll do some rough estimating, and this will speed up the light map baking process. All right, so we've got our post-process volume and our importance volume, and I'm just going to right click on these and move them to this lighting folder. One thing to note is that I have light mass portals here, and I'll hit G, and we'll see that every opening that I've got on each of these windows, I have a light mass importance volume there. This is going to help light mass calculate or let light mass know that these are kind of openings, and to just do some better calculations. I've also got an opening up here on the ceiling, which I have a light mass portal in as well. So now that I've got these, let's start lighting. So over here, I'm going to go and type in sky, and I'm going to drag in a skylight, and we can quickly see something change here. At the moment, this is set to stationary. If we drag it in and it's black, it usually means that the sky distance threshold needs some adjusting. If I kind of raise this up and down, we'll see kind of an effect happen here. So I typically, while it's in stationary, I'll usually drag it down until it's kind of the brightest there. And this just means that I could either scale up my sky sphere or bring the sky distance threshold down. Basically what the sky distance threshold does is it goes out a certain distance, captures those values, and then uses those values for lighting through the skylight. So type in 10,000 here. That seems to be a good value. All right, in my world settings, I've got them all at default. You can get to the world settings by double clicking on your root node here or clicking settings, world settings. So let's go ahead and check the build drop down, and let's check on our lighting quality. So I'm going to select preview. Again, world settings are at default, and let's do our first build. So here we can see Swarm showing our lighting status. And it's going to go pretty quick because we're on that preview build with default settings. So I'm going to go and go into lighting only, and we'll hit G, and we'll see that we're getting a little bit of light here some light coming in there. It's very subtle. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the skylight, and one setting that I want to check on, or uncheck rather, is that this lower hemisphere is solid color. So if I come down to the bottom here, we'll see that the bottom of my little scene here is completely black, and that's because it's basically saying the bottom half of the sphere is a solid color, and I've got that solid color set to black. I could change the color, and it would change that lower hemisphere color, and we can see some of this stuff happening because, again, this is a stationary light, so it's partially dynamic. I want this to be fully baked, so I am going to switch it to static. And before I uncheck the lower hemisphere, let's go ahead and do another build. All right, so here's that lighting. Got some light coming in through the side here, and actually my sun is over there, and I would like the sun to be coming in from over here. So the nice thing about this method is I can simply click on the sky and rotate the sky around. So there's the sun. I'm just going to rotate it until it's kind of off over to the side there, and we're going to get some nice shadows and light hitting this wall over here. So let's do another build. Okay, so now we've got some light coming in from the side there. Looking okay so far, but it's pretty dark. So again, let's go to lighting only, and let's grab a screenshot. All right, so next let's grab our skylight and let's uncheck that lower hemisphere solid color, and we'll do another build. So what this is going to do is this is going to allow all of the values from the dome underneath to be calculated in the lighting as well. So we should get some more light up on the ceiling, because now we're essentially having light come from the bottom, and we might get, you know, a little bit of green as well. All right, so I'll go to my bookmark. I'll hit F9, and let's check out our screenshots. So here is the lower hemisphere checked on, and there's the lower hemisphere checked off. So we can see we're getting much more bounce from the ceiling. Okay, yeah, so at the moment it's quite dark. So let's go ahead and let's grab our sky material instance, and I'm just gonna raise this up to 10. Now we're gonna have kind of a blown out exterior, but this should give us enough light to light the interior. So let's go ahead and do another build on preview. All right, so here we are with the sky brightness brought up. Let's go ahead and grab another screenshot and compare. So brightness of the sky set to 10. Here it is at 1. Looks like we've got some pretty good value here, but the detail is quite poor, and that's expected because we are in the preview setting. So let's go ahead and we will set this up to production and do another build. Be warned though that this production setting will drastically increase our build times. So here where that first build took about, it looked like it was about 16 seconds. This one will probably take a minute or two possibly. Actually, it looks like it's going quite fast. All right, so there we go, just under 2 minutes. And I'll go ahead and select my bookmark, and we'll grab another screenshot. So here we are with the preview setting. And here we are, here we are with the preview setting, and here we are with the production setting. So much, much better, but still not perfect. We've still got some, this mesh here is sticking out and it's getting hit by light. The calculation is still, not doing that great. So even on production, we're gonna need to do a little bit of tweaking. One note to take, I'm gonna go to my optimization view modes and show the light map density. We can see that most things here are in the green range. That's just the size of those light maps. So let's go back to lighting only. Now to clear this up, what I'm going to want to do is go into my world settings, and we're going to want to adjust some of these settings. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's just bring up the bounces, the indirect lighting bounces to 10 and the skylight bounces to 10. Let's do another build. I think I may drop this down to medium. Let's leave it at production. All right, so that bake has finished. Let's check out screenshot. So here it is with the indirect lighting bounces set to 10 and the skylight bounces set to 10. And here they are at their defaults. So we can see a lot more of the color of the room bounced around here. So it's starting to get pretty good. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna check on this using ambient occlusion. And this will bake the ambient occlusion, which will give us a nicer look. I'm also gonna uncheck compress light maps. Now this will make my light maps 4 times as large. In game, this is not a recommendation recommendation, and it says use caution when disabling this, but we want kind of the highest quality light maps, so I'm gonna uncheck that. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do is, in hopes to clear up some of this stuff here, is I'm gonna lower the static lighting level scale, and I'm going to increase the indirect lighting quality. So the rule here is that if you take lighting level scale and multiply it by indirect lighting quality, you should get 1. That's kind of the best return on investment here. So I'm gonna lower this to 0.5. So in order to get 1, I'm gonna increase this to 2. So 2 times 0.5 equals 1. I'm gonna check my lighting quality setting here. We are on production, and let's go ahead and give a bake. Now, by lowering either of these two values, or I'm sorry, by lowering this value and raising this value, it says here it's going to increase our build times. So if we lower this, it's going to increase our build times, and if we raise this, it's going to increase our build times. So we lowered it and increased this one, so our build times are going to be exponentially longer. But let's go ahead and hit build and check the results. All right, so that build has finished. We can see now that it is looking much more accurate. Go ahead and take a screenshot to compare. And here we are with the static lighting level scale reduced and the indirect lighting quality cranked up. So there it is at its default settings. We've also got that ambient occlusion baked in, and this is looking quite good. So let's go ahead and take a look at lit. So another thing we can do here is just add some fog. So if I type in fog, I've got this exponential height fog. Fog density here is set to 0.05, which is kind of all the way up. I've got this fog height fall off at 0.5, which is kind of putting it a bit more toward the ground. And we've also got this volumetric fog checked on, and I've got a color here to kind of match the interior a bit. All right, so the next thing I could do is add in a directional light. So let's type in directional, and let's bring in a directional light. I'll move this up here. Let's put our fog on, and let's go to lighting only. And what I'm gonna do is try to position it so that it is matching the angle of the sun in our scene, or in our HDRI. So here I can kind of see the shape on the wall from that window, and I'll just kind of rotate it there like that. I think we've got it matched up pretty good. Let's lower that there just to check. Kind of looking here to see again where the light from or the angle from my HDR is. I think we've got a little bit of it hitting there, and I think we're pretty close. So for my stationary light, I'll just leave these settings at default, and we can do another bake with the addition of our directional light. So one thing to note, that build took 272 seconds, where kind of before we were, around the 2-minute mark. So those settings more than doubled our build times. So let's go ahead and bake with the addition of our directional light. All right, so here we are with the addition of our directional light. Things looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and take a screenshot and compare. All right, so a couple things we could do if we wanted to soften the directional light. We could grab it here and do a couple things. If we take the light source angle and raise that, that will soften the shadows. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to raise that to about to 5. We're also going to use area shadows for stationary lights, and this will let the shadow be sharper near the base and get softer as it kind of gets further away from the light source. 5 might be too much. Let's do 2.5. All right, so let's go ahead and do a build there. And I think this will just about do it. All right, so while that's finishing up, what I'd like to do is run through the post-process volume. So we've got the post-process volume selected here, and let's expand the lens rollout. And the first thing we're going to do is bloom. So right now we've got bloom. It's a standard bloom. We could raise the bloom up here. We could kind of clamp it with this threshold here, but I'm not crazy about the standard bloom. I'm going to switch to convolution bloom. Now, warning, this says here that it's just too expensive for games. So that's okay. We're just trying to get the best look. So let's go ahead and select convolution. Then under advanced, we've got the convolution boost min, boost max, and multiplier. So the multiplier is just going to kind of raise and lower the bloom. So I'll just kind of leave it at its default. And really all I'm going to do is kind of clamp the low end here a little bit, maybe down to 5. All right, so next we've got exposure. We've done the exposure compensation, or rather we can adjust the exposure compensation here to brighten or lower the exposure, but I like to get this done in my lighting, so we're gonna leave that where it's at. Next is chromatic aberration. So this is a lens kind of effect where it replicates a cheap lens. And then we've got start offset, which is going to kind of push it toward the corners there. So I'm going to increase this up so we can really see what the start offset is doing. But I'm also going to reset the start offset, and I'm just going to give about 0.5 in the intensity there so we can just see a little bit of softening around the edges. Looks pretty good. So next is a dirt mask. So I'm going to type in dirt, and we're going to use this T-screen dirt overlay. We've got some bokeh shapes here, dust and dirt and scratches, and got the intensity here. Now up at 8, it doesn't really do too much with this image. So I'm going to crank this up to 100, and we're not really seeing this. We're not really seeing much at all. And what I'm going to do is actually turn on my lens flares. So I'm going to turn the lens flares on, and I'll crank up the intensity here a little bit. And now with the dirt mask, I can check this on and off, and we can see what it's doing. I can move the flares around, and we can see how much that's affecting the dirt mask there. So let's get back to here, and I'll leave this at 100, and the intensity, I'm just going to get a little bit. I just want a little bit of a sparkle here. Yeah, I think one is fine actually for this shot. So next, under image effects, we've got vignette. So we're gonna turn vignette on, and we'll give it a little bit of a vignette here to kind of draw the viewer in, maybe 0.7. And grain jitter, grain intensity, I'm gonna do 0.1, 0.3, get a little bit of grain there. Might be difficult to see in the video, so I'll crank this up all the way so you can kind of see, and then I'll dial that back down to 0.3. All right, not gonna do any depth of field. That I can do on my camera. So let's go ahead and get into color grading. So for color grading, I'm gonna take the white balance, and we can crank it up to warm up the scene. We can reduce it to cool off the scene, but I think I'm gonna do around 7,000. Just a tiny little bit of warm there, I think will be good. So next I've got saturation, contrast, and gamma. So let's expand those. Saturation, I'm just gonna desaturate it a little bit there. Just a tiny little bit. Contrast, I'm going to lower the contrast just a tiny little bit, and I'm going to lower the gamma just to get it a little more punchy. All right, and we can do the same for the shadows, midtones, and the highlights, but I just typically worry about the global stuff. That's usually enough for me. Film, I probably won't do too much. I mean, I'll show you what the effects are here. So there's the slope, toe, and this just kind of controls the curve on the image there. It's the slope of the curve, the toe of the curve, the shoulder, and then black and white clip. But I don't really do too much of this often. So we'll leave those at our defaults, but I wanted to show you. And then next, rendering features, let's go to ambient occlusion. So because I bake my ambient occlusion, I'll usually turn this occlusion to 0. Next, we've got global illumination. If I wanted to raise up the global illumination or lower the global illumination, I can do so here, but I'm not going to. I've got reflections, and I mean, we're not doing ray tracing in this one, but let's go ahead and get into screen space reflections. So with my screen space reflections, I'll just kind of crank that up, and it seems like around 60, it just kind of pops, kind of an all or nothing thing. So I'm just going to leave that up to 100. And I believe that's it. So yeah, with our bake finishing, let's go ahead and check out the result. So with this completed, we've got the softening here of the directional light. So let's get in our bookmark. Let's go to lighting only and grab a screenshot and compare. So there it is, softened up a bit, which I think is a nice touch. So here is the final image. We're gonna go ahead and go into full screen. I'm gonna hit F9, and we'll go take a look at this image. And then what we will do is I will open up the previous scene and see how kind of close we got. Okay, so here we are in the initial scene. Gonna hit F9, grab this screenshot, and this is the original, and this is the one that we made in this session. So the big thing is the direction of the sun there. I probably should have copied the rotation of the the sphere, and along with that, the direction of the light. So let's do that actually. So the way that this was rotated, the sky sphere here, I'm just going to write these down, or actually, you know what? I'll just copy them. I'm just going to copy the sphere here. I'm just going to hit Control C to copy that, and I'll write down the rotation of the sun here, the X, Y, and Z rotation values. And then we'll go in and open the example session, and I can delete that sky and just hit paste to paste that. And we've got our rotations there. Okay. And now with the sun, it could actually, well, I've got the values. So let's just write those down. So in X, we've got 30 degrees. In Y, we have -21. We were close there. And in Z, -322. All right. So this is just, again, matching the location and rotation of that sun, and then we'll compare. All right. So here's the final result. Let's go ahead and take a screenshot and compare. So here is the current scene, and there was the initial scene. So a couple differences. I didn't crank up the source angle as much. I believe this one was set to 5, so it's like really soft. We've also got some different post-process settings, some different color grading in the post-process volume, but I think we got pretty close. All right, so I couldn't help myself. I had to copy the settings that we had. So we have checked on use temperature. I didn't change the temperature, so this really shouldn't have any effect at all. Light source angle, we cranked that all the way up to 5, and we checked on use area shadows for stationary lights. And that really just kind of softened that directional light up a bit. Maybe too much, but again, I was trying to get it exactly like the original image that we started with. So let's grab a screenshot here, and here we go. Here's the current state. There what it was previously. So that's just with changing that light source angle and stationary. And then here's the original. So there to the original. There's a difference in color grading, but a pretty close result here. Looks like my lens flares were a little subdued here. So let's just take the post-process volume. Let's get to the lens flares. And I'll just crank that up just a little bit to get a nice little sparkle there on the image. And yeah, I think that's gonna do it. All right, so there you have it. I hope this tutorial helped you out. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you have any other suggestions on videos that you would like to see me make, also please let me know. I am going to be leaving a link to download the project in the description below, so don't forget about that. If this did help you out, please consider giving it a like and a subscribe. And thank you very much, and I will see you soon.